In this life, sometimes we overlook the most important things because we are too busy with the superficial. We race against time, work, and ambitious goals, forgetting that love and family are the most valuable gifts we can ever have. This story is not just an emotional journey of a man reclaiming what he has lost, but also a reminder to cherish the moments and the loved ones around us. Chris, a smart, handsome, and promising young man, once had everything a person could dream of: a successful career, fame, and wealth. But one wrong decision in his past caused him to leave behind what mattered most: love and family. Then, 10 years later, when his life had completely changed, that past returned. Like a haunting shadow, leading him on an unexpected journey. The story begins with mistakes, but ends with a rebirth, a return to love, forgiveness, and family, a place where he finds true happiness. Join us as we follow this emotional journey, understanding that sometimes the most important things are not what we achieve, but what we can hold on to in our hearts. Chris was a young, intelligent, and handsome man, always the center of attention. He was born and raised in a wealthy family in New York, where life was always abundant and luxurious. From a young age, Chris knew how to use his charm to get what he wanted. Spoiled, he never lacked for material things, but at the same time, he never felt true appreciation from those around him. Chris's life was filled with extravagant parties, social meetings, and short-term relationships. He wasn't looking for love, nor stability, he was simply living for the most satisfying moments. Every morning, he woke up to a modern life with a shiny sports car and important meetings, always leading in every field. He didn't have to worry about money or the future. Everything was already mapped out. Chris had everything that people called success, but deep inside his heart, he felt empty. It was a feeling he couldn't explain, but he had never really tried to solve it. One summer, Chris's family decided to take him to a small town in the northeastern United States, where there were no bustling crowds, no bright city lights. Just vast fields, gentle rivers, and an unusually peaceful atmosphere. It was during these days that Chris met Emily. Emily was a gentle, sincere, and vibrant country girl. She wasn't beautiful in the typical way that Chris was used to seeing in city girls: no tan skin, no flowing hair, but Emily had a unique charm, a beauty that only those who were truly perceptive could see. She was part of nature, living in harmony with the earth, with the fields, and the rivers. Every time she smiled, her eyes would light up like the afternoon sun shining through the leaves, a pure smile with no calculation, no pretense. During quiet afternoons by the river, Chris and Emily would talk endlessly about their dreams. Emily told him about her simple life, about the afternoons when she'd go home, sit by the fire with her family, about the simple dreams she always kept in her heart. Chris, though not the type to share easily, felt a strange connection with this girl. He began to see in her a sincerity he had never found in anyone in his world. The days spent with Emily passed like a dream, as they wandered along country roads, sat under the trees, and talked about simple things that were full of meaning. Their love grew naturally, like a river flowing gently through vast fields, not rushing, not hurrying. The way Emily spoke about the future made Chris feel like he was placed in a new space, where there was no noise, no pressure-filled life he had known. Emily asked for nothing, only that he be with her, to share those simple and fulfilling days. Chris felt peace in his heart when he was with Emily, but he didn't realize that what he was feeling was only the sweetness of first love, a love that he never imagined would come with difficult consequences. One night, in an unexpected moment, when they could no longer control their emotions, they made a mistake. Just once, but enough to change everything. Emily became pregnant. Suddenly, everything Chris had thought about his future collapsed. He didn't know what to do. He wasn't ready to become a father, wasn't ready to face the responsibility that a child would bring. Questions and doubts appeared in his mind. Can I do this? Am I strong enough to face this? When Chris found out, he was panicked, running away from reality. He couldn't face such a big change. He was afraid. He couldn't accept that his life would never be the same. Faced with what had happened, he could only do one thing: run away. He couldn't face Emily, couldn't face his family, and most of all, he couldn't face himself. He tried to leave. Chris's family, worried about his future, decided to take him far away from everything. They advised him to go to New York to start a new life. A life without the shadows of responsibility and burdens. New York, the city of lights, new opportunities, and a life without the past, and Chris left, leaving Emily behind, leaving the unborn child, leaving everything that he had once felt was true love. He never looked back, not once glancing at what he had left behind. He started a new life, where no one knew who he was, no one knew he had loved, or that he had beautiful memories. He walked into this city like a blank slate, trying to forget the past. But every night, in the lonely hours between meetings and social gatherings, memories of Emily would briefly pass through his mind, but he quickly pushed them away. He didn't want to remember, didn't want to face the past that he had forgotten. 10 years had passed, and Chris was no longer the young, dreamy, and naive man he once was. He was now a successful CEO, leading a major corporation with thousands of employees under his command. Every day of his life was meticulously planned, with every decision being strategic and potentially altering entire economies. He owned luxurious mansions, expensive sports cars, and had a packed schedule that left him with no time for himself. Chris's success was not due to luck. To achieve what he had today, he had gone through countless hardships, sweating, and dedicating himself unconditionally to his work. But this success came at a price. His life had become empty and lonely. Every day, he woke up to the bustle of meetings, calls, and important decisions. Evenings, instead of being spent with family, were spent alone in his grand mansion, gazing at the city from above, feeling no warmth. Although he had acquaintances, there was no one with whom he truly connected. His relationships in the business world were primarily about mutual benefit, with no real affection. He didn't need friends, he only needed allies. He wasn't looking for love, as he believed that such things would only distract him from his work. Every morning, when Chris looked in the mirror, all he saw was a successful man, but he was missing something very important: love, connection, and cherished memories. He had once had all of that, but then he walked away. Every night, when the city fell into quiet, he felt a deep emptiness. His sleep was no longer peaceful as it once was. Nightmares of the past, of Emily, and the swollen belly he had left behind haunted him in his dreams. Sometimes, he would wake up in a sweat, regret filling his heart. But he would quickly push it away, telling himself that it was all in the past and that nothing could change it now. Then one day, his life once again spiraled into new projects. His company was preparing for a charity trip to a poor region in the northeast of the United States. Initially, this was just a public relations strategy, a way to enhance the company's image in the eyes of the public. But Chris never anticipated that this trip would change everything. When the plane landed, Chris felt a completely different atmosphere. He was used to the noisy cities and luxury shopping centers, but here, everything slowed down, was still, and strangely simple. Worn dirt roads, humble homes, and the gazes of the locals made him feel uneasy. This trip wasn't just a typical charity event. Chris's company had organized gift distribution, school building, and infrastructure support for the area. But right from the first moments, he noticed that things weren't as simple as he had imagined. He was drawn into a strange feeling: the poverty, the hardships of the people he had only seen in economic reports before, as he visited a small village in the afternoon. He saw poor children running around. Their eyes were bright and cheerful, yet also carried hidden worries. At that moment, he had no idea that an important moment was about to unfold. As part of the charity program, Chris took part in gift-giving activities and helped families in the area. Everything was going smoothly until he entered a small area where children were playing. Among the crowd, a girl about 10 years old suddenly ran up to him, grabbed his hand, and pulled him closer. Her eyes sparkled, but there was something in her gaze that made his heart race. Her eyes, filled with anxiety and hope, made him feel as if an invisible thread was pulling him closer to this girl. That scene stayed etched in his mind, but the words of the girl did not come immediately. Chris's trip continued, but that moment felt like a premonition of something much bigger that was about to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, before we continue with the program, I hope you can leave a comment or share your thoughts in the comment section. If you find the program meaningful, don't hesitate to share it to support the channel and spread its values to others. I wish you all a meaningful listening experience. Chris stepped into the small village, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. Everything here was simple and rustic. The dilapidated houses and the rugged dirt roads made every step feel strange, as though he were worlds apart from the life he knew. The poor children were running and playing on the street, with no joyful laughter like at the lavish parties he usually attended in New York. Here, poverty was evident in every glance and every weary smile. The charity trip organized by his company was not just about work, it was also a way to build his image in the eyes of the community. However, what he saw here, the tired faces and the eyes filled with lack, made him stop and reconsider his own life. Lost in these thoughts, suddenly, a 10-year-old girl rushed toward him. She was small, frail, with bright, shiny eyes filled with anxiety. Her dress had faded, rough to the touch, and showed signs of age, yet it couldn't hide the pure beauty in her little form. Her hurried steps darted past other children, and her small hand tightly grasped Chris's hand as if it were her only salvation. Her gaze seemed to be desperately seeking help, and when her eyes met Chris's, a strange feeling stirred in his chest. There was something familiar about those eyes, but Chris couldn't explain why. The girl said nothing, only holding his hand tightly and pulling him along. Chris didn't have time to react, only following her in a daze, but the feeling in him grew stronger with every step. He could sense the determination in her stride, and despite being so small, she seemed to possess an unimaginable strength. When they reached a corner of the village, the girl stopped in front of a shabby, run-down house. Her small hand released his, and she looked at him, her gaze still full of hope but tinged with fear. It was a fear that no child should have to bear. She spoke in a soft, but urgent voice, "Uncle, please save my mother." Her words, gentle yet deeply poignant, pierced his heart like a cry for help. Chris couldn't say a word, standing frozen with his heart pounding. Though he had heard many heartbreaking stories throughout the charity trip, this girl's plea felt like a sharp wound to his soul. No words could express the suffering she was enduring. The girl continued pulling him into the house, but unlike the other small homes he had seen, this one seemed to bear the ravages of time and poverty. The crumbling house had a roof with rotting tiles, peeling wooden walls, and nothing inside except a small bed in the corner. The pungent smell of medicine filled the air, and when Chris looked at the bed, he couldn't believe his eyes. Lying there, exhausted, pale, and in pain, was Emily, the girl he had once loved, the one he had left behind in the past. She lay there, fragile and immobile, but those eyes, those were still the eyes he had once gazed into, still holding the tenderness and love he had never forgotten. Everything seemed to collapse beneath him. He couldn't speak, couldn't move. All the memories of those afternoons by the river, the innocent promises of a future together, now felt like a dark cloud pressing heavily on his mind. He wanted to turn away, wanted to leave, but Emily's eyes seemed to hold him there, as if calling him to save her, to save the daughter they had created together. The girl stood beside him, her gaze still fixed on her mother. The child, though small, was the only one left by the side of her sick mother. Chris could feel the silent bond between them, a connection stronger than any words. "Save my mom," the girl repeated, her small hands gripping his, as though trying to pour all her hope into him. Chris couldn't leave, he couldn't abandon this girl and her mother. Now, in that humble room, amidst the silent tears of the girl and the regret in his eyes, Chris realized there were things in life that he couldn't leave behind. And in that moment, everything seemed to boil down to one question: could he save the love he had abandoned? Could he save the family he had forgotten? Chris stood frozen in the dilapidated room, the walls turning yellow with age, the musty smell in the air making it hard to breathe. The small room had only a rickety bed and a few old wooden chairs, so simple, it couldn't be any simpler. His heart pounded, as if it were about to burst, when his eyes fell on the woman lying on the faded bed. It was Emily, the one he had once loved, the one he had left behind 10 years ago, carrying so much pain and so many shattered hopes, but now, she was no longer the vibrant, full of life girl he had known. Emily had become gaunt, with a sallow complexion, her deep-set eyes holding the weight of untold suffering. The marks of the illness ravaging her body were clear, but what immobilized Chris was her gaze, the gaze he had once been captivated by. It still shone, but not with the light of the love they once shared. It was the light of resilience, of forgiveness. She no longer blamed him, no longer resented him, despite all he had left her with, wounds that would never heal. He stood there, silently, looking at Emily, not knowing where to begin. Words of apology, of comfort, perhaps weren't enough to soothe the pain she had endured for 10 long years. Yet, all he could do now was sit quietly and look at her. Emily smiled faintly, a tired smile, yet there was still warmth in it. "You don't need to apologize, Chris," she said, her voice weak but steady. "I've lived, and my daughter and I have lived well. We don't need anything other than for you to know that we are okay." Her words made his heart feel tight, flooded with guilt that could never be washed away. She didn't blame him, not a word of reproach, even though she had struggled alone for all these years, raising their child, taking care of their family while he, the man she loved, walked away. He sat down beside her, his hands trembling as he took hers. Emily gently shook her head, as if she knew what he was thinking. "No, don't think like that," she said softly. "You don't owe me anything, Chris. What's past is past. I've learned to live with those losses, and I've forgiven you." Chris couldn't stop shaking. The feeling surged up from the depths of his heart, overwhelming him with emotions he couldn't control. He had walked away, hadn't been there when she needed him the most, hadn't kept the promises he made, and now, she was forgiving him. Truly, he didn't deserve that forgiveness, Emily. He couldn't speak any more. The apologies he had prepared for 10 years now seemed stuck, unable to leave his mouth. He could only sit in silence, looking into her eyes, trying to feel the strength hidden within them. At that moment, a soft noise from the table nearby caught his attention. He turned and saw a stack of fragile, old papers, piled on top of each other. Quietly, he approached and reached for the letters. His fingers trembled as he opened each page. Every sheet was written by the hand of a child, the handwriting messy but full of affection. "Daddy, I miss you so much," was the first sentence he read. "Mom says you're busy with work, but why don't you come home? I'm grown up now, I can take care of myself, you don't have to worry about me." Chris felt a sharp pain in his chest as he continued reading the letters. Each word, each line, felt like a knife cutting into his heart. How could he stand here, reading these words, knowing that he was the one who had left this little girl to grow up without a father by her side? How could he forgive himself when he saw her deprivation in every letter? "Daddy, I don't know what to do without you. Mom says I have to be strong, but I miss you so much. I want to know if you're okay, if you miss me." His eyes blurred with tears he couldn't hold back. He dropped the letter to the floor, knelt down, and buried his head in his hands, tears falling freely. The words of love, the words of reproach from the daughter he had never met, now devastated him. She had grown up in poverty, alone with her mother, waiting for a father who had never come. Emily didn't say anything. Only silently watched him, her own tears quietly falling. She knew that all she could do now was forgive, both for herself and for him. But she also knew that no matter how much forgiveness there was, the wounds in their hearts could never fully heal. However, she no longer wanted to hold on to hatred. "Chris." Emily gently called him, her voice soft but firm. "You don't need to blame yourself anymore. You made mistakes, but I've learned to accept them, learned to forgive. I don't hate you. Our daughter will understand, someday. She'll know that no matter what happens, we are still family. Don't let the mistakes of the past continue to haunt us." Chris looked up, into her eyes, and felt a strange peace. Her words, everything she had done, made him realize something important, that forgiveness was not a gift, but a liberation, not just for others, but for himself as well. "You've learned to forgive, but you've never stopped loving me, have you?" Chris asked, his voice choking. Emily smiled softly, then nodded gently. "The love is still there, no matter how much time passes." In that moment, Chris understood that even though everything had changed, and even though he might not be able to fix all the mistakes of the past, at least he had received back part of the love he had lost. After the tearful conversation and forgiveness in the small house of the girl from years ago, Chris could not forget Emily's gaze when she said, "You don't need to apologize anymore. I've learned to forgive a long time ago." Those words were like a mirror reflecting everything he had missed in the past 10 years. When he walked out of Emily's room, Chris was no longer the cold man he had once seen himself as. He felt he was standing at a crossroads, one that he could not turn back from. Images of Lily, of Emily, and of the life he had left behind haunted him, like waves crashing on the shore, strong and relentless. That night, he couldn't sleep. The feeling of emptiness clung to him, even though he had said his apologies, even though the tears had fallen. He couldn't go back to fix the past, but he knew one thing: he couldn't continue living as a stranger to his own family. He couldn't go on living a life of cold boardroom meetings, where the light of success seemed dull and meaningless to him. The next morning, Chris made a decision. He called his business partners, informing them of his departure from the CEO position and the suspension of all company operations. He didn't know what he would do next, but he knew his new journey would begin with his family. No more long meetings, no more endless ringing phones. He returned to a simple life, where each moment with Emily and Lily would be more precious than ever before, Chris had decided. And it was not just an empty promise. He left everything behind, the work, the meetings, the important contracts, and returned to live with Emily and Lily. This act was not only about giving up the role of CEO of a major corporation, but it was about embracing a new life, full of responsibility and challenges, where he would have to relearn how to love and care for the people he had once forgotten. The next day, he took Lily to school. That morning, the air was as fresh as any other ordinary morning, but for Chris, it was a turning point in his life. Lily walked beside him, her tiny hand clutching his. She was still innocent, still unaware of the changes her father had decided on. But one thing she was sure of, she could feel the care and love he had for her. "What story do you want to hear today, Dad?" Chris asked, a simple question he never thought he would ask in the past. Lily looked up at him with innocent eyes, full of warmth. "Tell me a story about animals, Dad," she said, her voice bright and sparkling. Chris smiled. This was the first time in many years that he could truly be a father, not just a man busy with work. He told Lily stories about cute animals, interesting tales he had never had the chance to share. They walked to school, and Lily's laughter was like music in Chris's mind. When he took Lily to class, he stood for a moment, watching her go inside. It was a moment he would never forget, the first time in his life he felt what it meant to be a real father, not the busy CEO, but a father who cared for his child, a daughter he had never had the chance to raise. Later, Chris returned home, where Emily was resting after her exhausting days. She had become much weaker from the illness that had plagued her for so many years. But her gaze still held the strength he had once loved. He sat by her bed, holding her hand, feeling the weariness in every breath she took. "Do you feel better?" Chris asked, his voice gentle, a stark contrast to the decisive man of the company. Emily opened her eyes, gazing at him intently, an understanding that needed no words. She nodded. "I'm fine now, thank you, Chris. But you don't have to worry about me like this, I'm used to it." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he leaned down and kissed her forehead, as an apology, as a promise. He didn't know how to make up for the years that had passed, but he knew one thing: he would never abandon her and Lily again. He couldn't change the past. But he would do everything in his power to fix the mistakes he had made. Chris didn't just stop at showing emotional concern for Lily and Emily, he began to take real action. He sought the best doctor to treat Emily. He was no longer the cold man, focused only on work and numbers. He researched treatment methods relentlessly, searching for ways to help Emily recover. One morning, as Emily sat at the breakfast table, Chris walked over and held her hand. "You'll be fine. I found the best doctor. We won't give up," he said, his voice steady, like a strong encouragement. Emily looked at him, her eyes sparkling with newfound faith. The father-daughter bond between Chris and Lily grew stronger every day. Every evening, he told her stories before bed, holding her in his arms, letting her feel the love she had been missing. Some nights, as Chris held her, he felt tears unexpectedly fall. These weren't tears of regret, but because he had realized how much he had missed, and now, he would spend the rest of his life making up for those shortcomings. As for Lily, she too began to recognize the change in her father. She started calling him Dad in a soft voice, but warm and full of love. Those words seemed to have been long awaited, and for Chris, it was an emotional moment. A cold man had now experienced true love, and it made him feel as if he had been reborn. Each day that passed, Chris understood more and more that the successes out there, the big contracts, the towering buildings he had built over the years, meant nothing if he didn't have his family by his side. The love and unity of a family were the most precious things he could achieve. He learned how to be a real husband and father, not through empty promises, but through actions, through daily dedication. Finally, after many long and tiring months, after countless sleepless nights filled with worry, Emily recovered. Not only did she regain her health, but she also felt a profound change in her life. Chris had done things he never thought he would. He gave up his CEO career, spent time with his family, and, most importantly, learned to love not just through words, but through actions. The day Emily was discharged from the hospital, Chris couldn't hold back his tears. He looked at her, and in her eyes, he saw deep gratitude, not because she had forgiven him, but because she had persevered, fought alongside him, and together, they had overcome great challenges. Now, he and his family would start over, in a small house, where there were no spotlighted career moments or urgent calls from the company. It was a place filled only with love, peace, and precious moments together. After a long battle with the dreaded illness, Emily finally overcame it. She not only returned to health but also had a spirit stronger than ever. Those months were a painful time for Chris, but also a time of valuable moments where he learned that life was not just about numbers, contracts, or stressful meetings. What he truly needed was his family, the small moments spent together, the loving glances, and the peaceful times he had forgotten in the past. The day Emily left the hospital, he held her in his arms, not knowing if it was the first time he truly felt the importance of family. For the first time, he realized that no matter how great the challenges ahead, as long as the three of them were together, everything would be fine. The whole family moved into a small, warm, and simple house. The house had no luxurious amenities, no expensive items, or fancy decorations, but it was where they felt the most love. Chris no longer had to push himself to chase after numbers or business deals. He spent time with his wife, his daughter, and himself. He began to understand that in life, the things that were truly valuable were not those that could be bought with money, but the genuine emotions, the moments of reunion, and the laughter in a family. Although he still didn't fully give up his work, Chris learned how to manage his time better. He started spending more time with family meals, outings, and conversations with Emily and Lily. Every morning, when he took Lily to school, he felt like he had found what he had lost. Every evening, when the three of them sat together, sharing the day's stories, he realized that this was what life truly deserved to be cherished. One evening, after the family had dinner together, they decided to take a walk on the beach near their home. The feeling of walking barefoot on the soft sand, hearing the waves crashing on the shore, and watching the sky gradually turn to sunset made him feel like he was living in a dream. The gentle breeze blowing through his hair, the warm golden sunset covering everything, seemed to erase all worries and hardships that had passed. Chris held Emily's hand, and with his other hand, held Lily's. The three of them walked together, their steps light on the sand, like a new beginning for their lives. There were no car engines, no ringing phones, only the sound of the waves and Lily's laughter. "Dad, Mom, look. The sunset is so beautiful," Lily said, her eyes lighting up as she looked toward the horizon. Chris smiled, followed the gaze of his daughter, and then turned to Emily. He didn't need to say anything, as she looked into his eyes and understood everything. They had gone through a long journey, endured many challenges, but now, all that remained was peace, harmony, and love. He held Emily's hand tightly, then turned to Lily and gently said, "Thank you, for always being by my side." He looked toward the setting sun, quietly feeling every passing moment. In that instant, he was no longer a powerful CEO, no longer a man busy with work. He was simply a husband, a father. And he understood that, in this life, nothing was more precious than the love he could keep. Everything could be lost, but love was something that never fades, and that was true wealth. The three of them continued walking along the beach, hand in hand, their hearts full of warmth and happiness. The story ended, but a new chapter of their life had just begun. A new life, full of hope and love. The story's ending marks the beginning of a new journey, a journey to rediscover oneself, overcome past mistakes, and find happiness in family love. The peaceful moments, the hopeful footsteps, and the laughter echoing through the small house prove that true wealth is not found in material things, but in the love we can preserve, cherish, and treasure throughout our lives. Chris had once been someone who only knew work, success, and money. He had run away from his past, but when faced with it, he realized that the most important thing in life was relationships, family, and love. Now, his life no longer consisted of long, exhausting days filled with cold business deals or social relationships. Now, he had found peace in his own home, with his wife and daughter, the people he had once left behind. In the gentle footsteps on the beach, he had found everything he needed. The feeling of being loved, surrounded by family, and realizing that love is the most priceless gift life can offer. He understood that, true wealth is not money, but the love you can keep after everything. If this story has touched your heart and you also wish to find peace in your own life, remember that this journey always begins with one decision: the decision to live with an open heart and seek true values. Let's share and spread positive stories so we can grow, change, and find joy and love in the small and precious things in life. Subscribe to the Heart Glow channel today, so you can continue following emotional stories and profound messages about love, family, and life. Together, we will explore more journeys of self-discovery and build a warm, loving world. Don't forget to click like and subscribe to receive the next wonderful stories, only on Heart Glow, where hearts and light connect.